Councilor Kitty Walk Chair, joined by Jesse Letterman, committee member, on issues brought before us by Council President Marcus Williams regarding traffic light patterns, and Councilor Jesse Letterman, the crossing light on State Street, and joining us are DPW Director Chris Signoli and Betsy Johnson. And I believe are you representing Aqua? Or are you here in a different capacity?
Well, I sort of have two hats regarding this issue. One being the Armory Quadrangle Civic Association, who hosted a community meeting about the State Street. I wouldn't necessarily, we're not set on a light, we're set on improving the pedestrian crossing at State Street. But I'm also very involved with Walk Bike Springfield, which is the city's group of residents working to improve walking and bicycling safety throughout the city.
Okay, we've also been joined by, I believe, Deborah Hubbard.
Deborah Huber is also another member, active member of Walk Bike Springfield.
Well, I think the best way to
but also who lives on Page Boulevard. So she's interested also in the Page Boulevard section of the agenda as well.
Okay, well, we're going to take the agenda in the order that it's written. And the first one is the, and I believe Council President Williams, this is of interest to you. The traffic light patterns and accidents of Page Boulevard and Brookdale intersection. So you want to state your concerns and then Chris can address them?
Sure. Thanks, Madam Chair. For first, thank you all for being on the call today. The reason that I had requested a couple of these agenda items to be here is I had received a few emails regarding the intersection at Brookdale Drive and Page Boulevard. I believe it's been identified as one of the most dangerous intersections in the Pioneer Valley. And I know there's certainly been some businesses that have reached out expressing concerns, expressing the fact that they've also seen several accidents take place at that intersection, and are just wondering if there's a plan to address that so we, of course, can decrease any potential fatalities or injuries that might come from future accidents. So that was the one of the main concerns that I wanted to bring forward today. And if you know, might be appropriate for Chris to speak on that.
Sure. Just to give you a little background on the emails that you received, Marcus, and anybody else to receive, we've received probably 5 or 6 letters as well. And interestingly enough, it's an organized group of people, because basically it was the same letter for everybody that had all the same information on it. Mm-hmm. What we did probably about 1.5 years ago or so, we did a traffic warrant study on Page Boulevard for a signal at Bircham Street. And it came in just below the standards to put a traffic signal in there. And what we said is that we were going to look at the location again in 1.5 years, 2 years. And we are in the process of working that through right now with the PVPC to do the study for that area. One of the problems right now with doing traffic studies is traffic is still low. Simply COVID, there's not a lot of, there's not a lot of bus traffic. There's not a lot of school traffic. So I wanted to time it just right to be able to get that data. So we're working with PVPC on getting that done. Once we have that information complete and knowing what the results of that one are, we're going to do the exact same thing at Brookdale. And the reason why we have to wait on that is depending upon what we do or don't do at Bircham has an impact on how we do the study at the other location as well. So we probably within the next, I'd probably say outside 6 months, we will be doing a traffic warrant study at the Brookdale location. For that, a special thanks to the East Springfield Civic Association. Up on Page Boulevard, that location there, we've put in a speed board, permanent speed board that we get data off of. We pull it off probably monthly there. So we have a lot of speed information, cars, all of that good stuff. So we have a lot of that information. But we're going to be starting, hopefully within the next month, starting the study at Bircham Street. And once we finish that, we'll be going down and doing the warrant study down at Brookdale. Depending upon the results, if the results at that location require us to do traffic signals or whatever sort of improvements there, we then make a decision inside the city how we plan on funding that, whether it becomes a Mass DOT project, how we end up doing that. So that then becomes the next step on how to do that. But that's what our plan is at this point for the Brookdale location. Just to go back to what you were talking about, Councilor Williams, with some of the emails and letters, we responded, the first couple that we got, we responded to the people via email. What I was planning on doing is responding en masse with the same letter to all of the people that have submitted something to us with our plan. But I wanted to wait and make sure that we had the information back, that we had a date for the studies for PV.
Okay, and Chris, tell me what those initials stand for, PC, whatever you said.
PVPC, the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. We're kind of reaching out to them because they do studies like this for free, and
Okay.
an application for them. It's not a huge expense to begin with, but they do them all over the Pioneer Valley. So especially when it's one of the higher crash locations, they jump in and do it. So we have the Planning Commission doing that for us. We're just waiting for a schedule back from them on when that's going to start. But like I said, my concern right now is that traffic is still so low that I think we're going to get some artificially low numbers that kind of concern me. So I want to make sure that we have enough information and be able to extrapolate if we need to.
Okay, great. Councilor Letterman, did you have any concerns on this issue?
No, Madam Chair. I'm glad to hear DPW is moving forward with the situation. Hopefully we can see this back and get the issue addressed.
Okay, and we've been joined by Elizabeth Stevens, and she has her hand up. Elizabeth?
Yes, some of us came in a little bit late, and so I don't know
that
what
was a big
issue has
problem.
been. I'm not complaining about that. I just want to know what is the issue that has been under discussion.
The issue under discussion is the first issue on the agenda, which is the traffic light pattern and accidents on Page Boulevard and Brookdale intersection. We haven't gotten to State Street yet.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't get on the meeting myself. I kept, like Groundhog Day,
Here now.
it kept coming up, but we're here now. So, okay. Anyone else would like to speak on? Hi, Linda. Good to see you. Hi, Barbara. Betsy?
Yeah, no, I'll second it at the Joint Transportation Committee meeting of the Pioneer Valley. The meeting that I attended last week, this issue is definitely on their next year's work plan. Yep. So and I don't think there's any reason that work plan is going out for public comment for over the next 3 weeks. And so there's no reason it shouldn't be on there. Right. Our concern is how to put on the agenda at some point that Page Boulevard as a whole, not just intersection to intersection, needs to really be looked at as to how to maybe with striping, with other speed control efforts other than check your speed and electronic signs, which are some of the things we'll get to that we'd like on State Street as well, that we, overall the speed on that roadway has to be brought down. And it's a matter of education with the electronic signs, but it's also a matter of engineering to make the width of the roadway that the cars are going, the vehicles are going on, at least feel narrower, and maybe it's putting in a bike lane, or maybe it's just some other speed management methods. And it isn't just at these intersections. All of Page Boulevard needs some serious looking at as something that should get on the agenda at some point. And maybe Deb wants to, as someone who actually lives on Page Boulevard, wants to speak to that.
Thank you, Betsy. I'm sorry I can't put my hand up. I'm having trouble with my phone. I don't find the thing to do that. My
Just wait.
apologies
Oh,
for
you can't.
jumping in here.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, the thing on Page Boulevard, that is a tough intersection for people to get out of onto Page Boulevard. The speed is really fast there because they're coming down the hill and going up a hill. And the big problem, in addition to that intersection alone, is that Page Boulevard needs some pedestrian and cycling accommodations. Right now, especially that area, well, from Roosevelt Avenue all the way to Pasco, there are basically none. And so we really would like to look at an overall plan for that corridor.
Chris, is that something that's in the works anywhere?
From a sidewalk perspective right now, it's not. One of the things that I did is that I went back and I found all of the original design documents for that road, because Page Boulevard was, I want to say it was like 1965, 66, 67, something like that. When the section from kind of Burton to Bulk Mail Center was completely realigned there. And there was it was a Mass DOT project, and there was an exemption put in for sidewalks on most of the sections of that. And it hasn't been revisited at this point.
So, yeah, how do we get it to be revisited? What steps do people have to take to get it revisited?
Well, the issue, if putting in, I always hate to say putting in sidewalks is an easy thing. In a lot of roads, it is an easy thing. But then what you end up having to do is at all the you have to build it. You have to make sure you have enough right of way. You got to make sure you got the roadway protected. Do we need to put guide rail between the bikeway and the roadway? That sort of thing. So it's just, that becomes an engineering exercise more than anything else.
Yeah, but I mean, for right now, I mean, people obviously want some kind of relief and signage or something like that. I mean, how does that?
Yeah, well,
go through the traffic commissioner, or what can they do?
We've put up. There's been a lot of passive signage put up. Watch your speed. We got the speed board up now. So it's really been. Yeah, I want to say that it's been more of the simple things than it has been the more complex stuff, because the roadway, you really can't do anything. There's nothing simple that can be done out there that's going to solve a problem that you can just throw a few dollars at and it's going to fix it. It would need much more of a comprehensive plan. And once we have a better idea of what would need to be done at those intersections, then I think we would then, if we're doing those intersections, then all of a sudden the offshoot of that becomes sidewalks, becomes, whether you're talking about widening or narrowing or bike lanes, then you get into the volume of truck traffic. One of the major issues on that road is the volume of truck traffic that is on the eastern section of Page Boulevard. And when you get into truck traffic and you start looking at bike lanes, and you start to get into widths and you get into the grades, because the roadway grades there are very steep. So you get into a lot of the engineering design issues on that. So it's really going to end up being an offshoot of what comes out of the warrant studies that we do at those intersections as to what we end up doing out there.
So let me just ask you, Deborah, are you looking for something temporary? I mean, you probably don't really want to wait for all these studies to be done. I don't know. What is there something specific you'd like to see done?
I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Probably
Yes.
not.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
you can?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So no, I mean, I honestly think that what needs to happen on that area of road is that the lanes need to be narrowed, and possibly what would be best would be for a shared use path to be built. That's my personal perspective from my, current experience. And it is a big project. Just throwing down bike lanes on that stretch of road is really not the best answer, in my opinion.
I agree with that.
Okay, so we're all in agreement that something needs to be done, but there's no timetable then? Or,
I don't think that there's no simple solution to do something. This would end up being something much comprehensive once we get those warrant studies back.
what kind of a study?
The warrant studies, because that's going to determine what we need for roadway widths and what we're going to need for traffic signals, where we're going to need them, volume of traffic, turning lanes, things like that.
There's like no grants or something you can apply for it for this. Does this all come from
It would,
Chapter 90 or?
once we do the
must be
warrants,
a
once we do the
done?
warrant studies, we then make a decision again, whether we want to run it through the Mass DOT process or not. I love running it through the Mass DOT process because they end
Pay
for
for it.
everything. The problem is when we run it through the Mass DOT process, it becomes a 2, 3, 4 year process.
Yeah,
So that's, there's the good and the bad. So depending upon how much it is, projects like this are on my list that we've submitted to the congressman as part of our infrastructure bill. So, maybe we get money directly out of that and it doesn't have to run through the DOT process, because the DOT process is just ridiculous at this point as far as time. It just, takes forever.
okay. I'm not sure about my colleagues, if you have other further comments on this, Marcus or Jesse?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to say, Chris, appreciate the information there. And just as it relates to those who have actually reached out and submitted letters, it'd be great to have a coordinated effort with some mention of this meeting within the context of that, to show that we're being responsive to some degree, if that's possible.
Yep, that's no problem.
Well, I think it would be advisable to keep this on the Maintenance and Development Committee radar and, follow up on it and see if there's any progress or anything that's able to be done. So if there's no further comments on this particular portion, I think most of you people are here for crossing light on State Street. Chris, I think you've addressed this several times.
A few times.
Yeah. So would you rather hear what people are concerned about? Maybe
Yeah,
we'll
I'd rather hear from the people first.
All right, I'm going to start with our council president, Marcus Williams, on the crossing lights on State Street.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I know Councilor Letterman and I have been in discussion around this issue for a few years, actually. And I know we've been working, of course, with Walk Bike Springfield and members here to see if this will develop, and of course, following the same, timeline as what Chris just mentioned for the other project. It seems we've reached our 3-year mark almost. So it's good to reconnect and just talk about any possibility that may happen there. It's sad to see some cases of accidents that have occurred with pedestrians. So I am hopeful that something in the interim can be done to address that, because that's probably one of the busiest intersections in terms of crossing to get to the library and all that, that we'll see in the city. So something needs to be done. And I stand in kind of certainly in solitude with the rest of the folks on the call who believe the same.
Thank you, Council President. Councilor Letterman.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair, and to Chris for being here, and to the members of Walk Bike and the residents from the neighborhood. I mean, I agree with the council president. It's been a long-standing concern. We hear often from residents, library patrons, and library staff, and we recognize that something has to be done. So I think what we need to accomplish here today is seeing what options exist and what we can do. I just want to be clear that I think to do nothing is not an option, because although there are sort of workarounds that have been discussed, the just realistic situation is that people continue to cross there, and they're going to continue to cross there. And we need to make it safer to do so, because otherwise I think we are sort of setting ourselves up for another situation to occur that nobody wants to see. So I'm hopeful that we can come to an agreement of what is possible to be done, whether that is, the various different proposals that have come forward before or something new. But I think we need action on it. So I'm looking forward to hearing from the community, and always grateful to Chris for his expertise and time.
And I would like to say that it was through Councilor Letterman's efforts that we have scheduled this meeting because of his concern for this particular issue. So okay, there is a hand raised. I'm usually the one raising the hand, not looking for the hand.
Okay.
So Elizabeth.
So, there are two examples that I can give you of how the problem could be solved. In the Mason Square area on State Street, 4-lane road, the fire station has been renovated into apartments. And as a result of the fire station, there's now a parking lot across State Street from the apartments. And so they have installed, I'm not going to have the correct term, but it's a pole, and the pedestrian who wants to cross the road pushes the button, and the traffic light comes on, and the cars stop, and the people walk across the road. Pedestrian activated light, something like that. So that already exists. It's recently put in. And it's working fine. And I speak as a driver. I was driving west on State Street, and there was a red light, and I stopped, and people crossed the road. There isn't one other example on Union Street between Main and East Columbus. There is now, what would I call it? It's just a little bit of like a little sidewalk, a little island in the middle of that 2-lane road where people can walk across one lane, be safe on the little island, and then they can walk across to get to MGM. So I think that, not being an engineer, but being someone who thinks that we need to value pedestrians as much as we do the time of people driving automobiles. And I think that is the basic problem, is that wasn't thought of when State Street was redone. And so nobody said, oh, this is a regular place for people to cross. And we need to begin to think, okay, how do we make the pedestrians safe? Because for the most part, the cars are safe. So we need to either put in something where people can cross a little island, or the preference would be to have the pedestrian activated light. Even though it's near another intersection that has a light, we have to let that go and do what will keep pedestrians safe. Thank you.
That's a very worthy objective. I'm going to call in the order. The hands are up. Betsy Johnson.
Well,
and I'll get to Linda and Barbara after Betsy.
Yeah, I'll say, we did the Armory Quadrangle. Since this has been an issue that there are people in the association who will claim we've been working on, they've been bringing this up for 15, 20 years. But it continues to be a major issue of the association. And then, needless to say, I have this other hat associated with Walk Bike Springfield, where I've done a lot of research and in fact took the UMass Transportation Center's course on warrants and on what are called pedestrian safety countermeasures, and have seen how unfortunately this road was redesigned and rebuilt literally 5 years before what has been called complete streets, and the whole reorientation of how roadways are supposed to be designed, thinking about all users, not just moving the cars. And if we were to redesign State Street today and follow complete streets guidelines, it would not be done the way it currently exists. So we recognize that, so at our meeting, the Aqua meeting in January, which Jesse attended, as well as Councillor Sean, what's Sean's name? Curran, yeah, attended. We, as well as, you know, folks from strong towns who are not going to make Springfield look very good when he writes up the issue here in this article. You know, we didn't come up, we're not the ones who feel we need to come up with the exact solution, but we just want there to be a serious looking at the idea that there's this overall speed on State Street is too high to begin with. How about from even looking at considering what happens if from Spring School Street, the road becomes one lane going down the hill. That makes it not as wide a crossing, because that's where the speeding takes place. So they're really zooming down that. If they see at all that the light is green beyond Classical, boy, do they come down. And you know, they're picking up speed going up the hill. So, you know, maybe that stays two lanes to keep so that traffic doesn't back up into downtown too much, except that State Street's only one lane by the casino. So we can't have it just be, you know, one lane in each direction. We can't have it just be one lane in each direction by the residential museum church section of the road as well. Churches and the museum don't count as much as the casino. You know, I mean, so these are some of our questions, and whether it's putting in a refuge island, whether it's putting in just hawk beacons, these are all different things we just at least want given serious consideration and figuring out a solution. There's a we have a link on the Walk Bike Springfield website of a video that a resident took that shows in over a just like a 3-minute, 4-minute time period, how many people you'll say illegally cross, but it's human nature to cross the way they do. And then I took a video walking from the parking lot, and I'm not disabled like my husband, so I actually walk slowly, but not as slowly as my husband. And it took me 4 minutes to walk down the hill, wait for that light, and then walk back up the hill. That is why pedestrians are just not going to continue to do this. And we just can't have another death at this at this crossing.
Yeah,
So that's enough of my soapbox, but we just want alternatives looked at.
Okay, well, that's what we're meeting on. Hopefully we'll make some progress. Linda, good to see you.
I thank you. So I'm just here. I have not been involved fully in this, although aware of it, until I moved to the Classical condos. So now I am right across the street from the library. And, you know, to amplify what Betsy said, the human nature of it, we have very responsible employees who work at the library. When shifts are over, people come out of the library and cross not by walking down the hill and walking up the other side, which is actually a fairly steep grade. So I count the library employees as good members of our society, civically involved, concerned about Springfield, their employer, and yet the arduousness, I want to say, of the hills and the indirectness of the exit is just too much even for them. So I think I just want to build on the idea that this is not a simple, well, you shouldn't cross there, because the compulsion and the circumstances and the need to cross there is just so clearly it's an imperative. And people think, again, to the idea about the speed of the traffic, people actually do think that they can beat the traffic or that they can be aware of any oncoming traffic. Because of the speed of the traffic, it's somewhat illusory that you can actually do that. So it's my lived experience that, wow, is this dangerous? And I would thank you for allowing me to testify to that.
Well, thank you for your testimony. Barbara. Good to see
Hi,
you.
thank you, Madam Chair and
Forest
neighbor.
Park transplant.
Yeah, I also agree that I live at Classical, and I cross that street at least 3 times a week. And I used to walk my dog out there every day. So I'm maybe one of the few people here who uses the crossing at in front of Classical. And I do not go down to the light. I do not take the time. It's a steep grade. But I want to remind the engineers that the way the lights are timed right now, you can pick up a time when there's no traffic at all. It's a wasteland, and you can get across that street with no problem. So that's why people take the chance of doing it. However, in the summer, we've got the motorcyclists who are never regulated by the police department, who race up and down State Street as loud as they possibly can and contribute to the problem. They come at you by surprise. And it would just be such a simple solution to do one of the things that Betsy or Elizabeth have suggested. That the island in the middle would be perfect. But they could also put a timed light where people are crossing that takes advantage of this period of time when there is no traffic, and when traffic would be just barely picking up speed, and it would be easy for westbound traffic to slow down because they'd see the light. So it wouldn't impede traffic that much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara. Deborah, did you want to add anything? I see a hand up. Deborah,
Oops,
did you want to add anything?
figure out how to unmute.
Okay. Deborah?
There we go. Sorry, I had to find that darn microphone.
Okay.
Yes, I just want to say that that's a great idea Barbara just mentioned, trying to do something that takes advantage of the current light cycles. And Betsy's mentioned a number of things, and I fully support those ideas as well. In particular, we've been looking at possibly making one side of the road, like the library side of the road, State Street, to have parking again, so that people wouldn't have to cross the street. Make that a 1-lane travel lane, possibly. Have 2 lanes coming out of downtown, but 1 lane going in. Narrow that down so it would slow the traffic, and having the parked cars there, would give people an alternative to using the parking lot and needing to cross. So there are many, many things that we feel could be considered and would help the situation. And we really would like the city to take up this task of getting an answer.
Councilor Letterman, do you have any comments you want to add?
No, I'd be interested to hear from Chris. And Madam Chair, I would just simply say the president had put a message in the chat. I don't know if you saw it, that he had to sign off, but he wants to continue the conversation. He had another meeting, so.
Oh, I'm sure you, Marcus, and myself will follow up on this. Okay.
Yeah, we'll update Marcus. So Chris, what do you, or I'll turn it back over to the chair, but I think to hear from Chris would be good.
Okay,
Chris, a lot of these are good suggestions. I'd like to know whether or not we can implement any of them. And
I'm just going to pull up, I'm not going to share it. I just want to have something up in front of me. I just want to find it. There we go. Okay. In the 70s, and actually probably until the late 80s, there used to be a crossing at the library. It was removed through the Traffic Commission because there was a significant amount of accidents and pedestrians were being hit in the crosswalk. So it was removed. The major problem on State Street at that location is westbound, that the traffic stop queue at the intersection for Chestnut Street backs up during peak times past the library. So what was happening is people are crossing through stop traffic. The fatality that occurred there was somebody that crossed the right lane and was hit by a car traveling in the left lane. So one of the issues is that if you put something in there, you now have to deal with the traffic situation. Now, just to go backwards as far as the design of State Street, that was done before I was here. However, under no circumstances was Mass DOT going to allow a crossing at that point. I can't remember who mentioned it, whether it was Debbie or Liz or Betsy, that it was before the complete street stuff. So you were looking at a lot more standard design stuff at that point. Changing the configuration of the roadway to one lane there, in my opinion, would be a traffic disaster. Traffic now backed up 250, 300 feet. It will be backing up 450 feet. The intersection will be a failure, meaning it will take you 2-3 cycles to get through the intersection.
So what?
Which will then, one of the problems we have with State Street, and just to kind of go off the script here for a second, there was some discussion a number of years ago of doing a, and I'm trying to remember the terminology, but it was like a bus express route up the corridor. And the major problem was that in order to do that, you were going to have to do some lane narrowing and removal of lanes, and the traffic studies just couldn't warrant anything like that. So getting rid of a lane from a traffic perspective is difficult. The problem in the area is there's no alternatives. So if you're coming down State Street and you want to try to avoid an area and pick someplace else to get to downtown, there really isn't a good way to do it. You know, we don't have a lot of great parallel roadways. You know, people are not going to jump on Union Street. It's a difficult roadway. They're not going to jump on Union. So there's not a lot of good parallel roadways. But so as part of the Mass DOT process, obviously what's out there now is what was approved. When we started looking at traffic configurations as part of MGM, there was a detailed traffic study that was done. There was all of the offsite work that was envisioned as part of the process. There was road safety audits completed, and the entire corridor of State Street from West Columbus all the way up to Oak Street was reviewed. Shared bike lanes were put in with that. And I know I'm jumping back and forth between projects, but they were the discussions that were going on. One of the discussions that came up was in the area of the library, we have bus stops and things like that. The discussion was, well, maybe what we can do is widen the road there, get the buses to pull off a little bit because those are causing a little bit of a traffic issue as well. And one of the problems we have with the buses is when buses stop, people get off the bus and sometimes walk around the front of the bus. So we've had problems with that as well. The issue in the area of the library, when they were designing State Street, they were looking at putting in a island all the way down to Chestnut, Maple Street. The roadway couldn't accommodate it because what's on the side of the roadway, just off the roadway, it couldn't be widened. I don't know the 100% details. So what we've done over the last couple, 3 years is we started to look at a lot of the alternatives that were discussed here today. When the roadway was redone, the intersection of State Street at Dwight and Chestnut was designed as essentially a single intersection. So that because they are so close together and the traffic patterns, when it was first put into play, it was a disaster. Traffic was not moving good. If you hit the pedestrian button at Chestnut Street, Dwight would stop. So what was happening is people were sitting at an intersection, and because those are geometrically big intersections, the amount of time that you're giving a pedestrian to get across that street is, I think, 25 or 30 seconds. So as a driver, you're sitting at an intersection looking at red lights for 30 seconds and people get impatient. So what we did is we took those apart and now they're treated separately. We still have some problems with turning and people getting trapped a little bit, but it's not as bad as it used to be. We've looked at a couple of options of installing and the term I'm going to use is a hawk system. And it's the rapid beacon that Betsy was talking about up on the upper section of State Street. And to jump up there for a second, that was a proposal that was made by the development that was going on up there. And it went through a significant amount of review. And the major issue of where that was placed, it is completely outside the influence of any stop queues, outside the influence of any of the intersections. So if that traffic signal, if somebody hits that beacon, it is not going to have an impact on the intersections up and downstream at all to get people across. There was even looked at as part of that, does there need to be a refuge island in the middle to kind of break that off? And it met all the criteria that didn't really need to be put in place. So when we take that and we move that down State Street, putting in a beacon in front of the library, number one, you do get into the influences of the other intersection. And just as an imagine, if you are going up State Street up to the east, and you get a green light at Maple, and you have a green light at both Maples at Dwight and Chestnut, then you hit a red light. That crossing across the street is going to be 30 seconds. Traffic will be backed up into the other intersections. So you then have to design the intersection triplet, which now means that you're going to be influencing the traffic at all three intersections, controlled at a pedestrian location. And I believe it was Linda that said, or maybe it might have been Barbara, one of the major problems when you install these pedestrian, and even at regular intersections, people hit the button, but then see an opening and take it before they have the clearance. So now you have a red light with nobody crossing. You then, in order to meet the requirements, have to put in, at that location, you would be required to put in a island in the middle to make it a double crossing for safety purposes. Now, the big problem that we have with this is we have to go back to Mass DOT, get a modification, excuse me, a modification of the traffic control agreement that was done as part of State Street. They reviewed the one for Upper State Street, found no impact on that, and said, you can go ahead with it. The one down here, we reviewed it and discussed with them as part of the casino, and they basically said everything that you would do at this location would be 100% on your dime, and would also possibly require the city of Springfield to reimburse Mass DOT for the improvements that for back in 2010. So I didn't even want to open that can. But what we've done from a preliminary standpoint on the traffic is that we have looked at it, and my opinion has always been, is that installing a crossing at that location is going to cause, in my opinion, much more pedestrian traffic safety issues than people should be following the rules now. I do not think installing a crosswalk there is safe. People driving on that road will not honor it. It's just, I fear by putting something in there that by putting pedestrian things in there, pedestrians will feel safe. I do not feel that people will be safe there. The accidents that have occurred there, the fatality, and I hate to get into it with details, the fatality that occurred there with the child, the woman walked underneath the fence to go out into traffic in the right lane. Traffic was stopped, walked across the left lane, the person coming down the left-hand lane hit them. That's what the situation will be. There will be stopped traffic there because that's how far traffic backs up on State Street. So that's always been, and I have no problem doing studies there and getting the information. Everybody that I have talked to from an engineering perspective says the warrant for what needs to be done there will not be met. I can talk to the mayor. I can ask him if we want to get funding for it, but I can almost guarantee that the safety standards from a state perspective will not be met at that location without basically destroying traffic on that roadway, especially during peak times. And traffic on that roadway during peak times, and I know I deal with Betsy and the bike people all the time. While everybody wants to be excited about fixing everything for the pedestrians, you cannot ignore 27,000 vehicles going up and down that road every day. One of the comments that was made to me when we were talking about the X was somebody made a comment to me that said, good, we'll redesign this thing. I don't care about vehicles. I want it for pedestrians. You still can't ignore 27,000 cars that are going through there. People will drive the way that they drive, honor whatever it is they honor. And if they're speeding, the accidents will still occur. My major problem is we make all these improvements and you still have fatalities. You had fatalities there when there was a crosswalk. It was obviously not in the, it was just a standard crosswalk. There was actually a period of time where there was a police officer there during the late 70s and 80s there that used to monitor it when classical was still classic. So it used to be there. But that has always been my fear when we've looked at it from all of the traffic perspectives, that we are going to if we design it so that it is 100% safe for the pedestrians, that area will turn into a massive traffic problem. So by solving one problem, you're creating another. And that's always been my fear, is that you're just going to create a problem. When a vehicle gets impatient, that's when the accidents happen. And I know it's not a popular stance that I'm having on this. I just think that it would be much more, and I always point at certain other areas that pedestrians will feel that they can walk out into traffic and the vehicles are going to honor it. And I just think that you're going to create an area that's going to be that's just going to cause as many, if not probably more problems than you have now. And I know it's not a popular stance.
Counselor Letterman, I see you want to say something.
Sure. Thanks, Madam Chair. Chris, thanks for your thorough analysis as always. You know, I think ultimately this is sort of a question of priorities and not only numbers. And so, you know, I actually personally want to slow traffic on State Street at that area, whether it queues or not. And I think there's a number of good reasons for it. One of which is that, you know, we just had a meeting a few weeks ago about the new overlay district for the casino and basically trying to sort of increase general walkability of downtown. I know that the city's put a lot of funds into connecting the quadrangle to downtown via Pinchin Park. And so, you know, I think that if you're coming down State Street, you know, the reason it was slowed to 2 lanes by the casino was to create an entertainment district type feeling. And I personally think that district feeling should start over by Classical. So I think that would be an improvement for Classical. It would be an improvement for the development that's going on in the old school department building, and it would be an improvement for St. Michael's Cathedral, and really for that entire area. So I just personally think we should start the downtown feel farther up. But I have a couple of questions. You know, for one, I have 2 questions, I guess. The first is more of a statement. I think that when we're talking about the crosswalk that was there before, it started right in front of the library steps and went across to the parking lot. That's not really where I would envision a crossing being. If it were to be put in, I would envision it more so kind of in between there and the front door of Classical, more so in the middle of State Street. There is a crossing on State Street, sort of strangely placed, I think, an unprotected crossing up at the federal court.
Elliott, at Elliott. Elliott Street.
Where Pellegrino's place is. So that's a completely unprotected, just crosswalk across the middle. I mean, how is that there? And why can't we just take that out and put something in the middle that gives plenty of room on both sides for traffic? I think the Hawk requirement's like 350 feet. That would be 350 feet. And would that address, if it wasn't right in front of the library, but more so in the middle, would that address some of the DOT concerns? And last point, I mean, we're on the verge of getting millions of dollars in infrastructure funding. So, you know, I sort of have some confidence that we can find some funds for it if that becomes a requirement. But yeah, those are my 2 questions: is what's the deal with the unprotected crosswalk farther up, and what if we dropped something in the middle? The other option, of course, is get rid of that parking lot altogether and go, you know, buy something on the other side somehow and just create more parking without a crossing. But I think that's a whole different conversation. So that's kind of what I think. What do you think, Chris?
Well, and just to address that, Jess, all of the requests that I have ever received with regard to this crossing have always been to basically reinstall it where it was.
Yeah, I don't think that would make sense. I agree. I don't think right there makes sense. I agree.
That's not what we're looking at all.
And so that, and the issue has been people coming up. Now, that there used to be a set of stairs there, I mean, which were goofy anyways. We've done probably 10 years ago or so. I remember when I was with the city, there was a plan on the east side of the library, between the library and the church. There's kind of dead space area there where it's been looked at for parking. And there's kind of a couple of odd shaped, there's like the odd shaped parcel that's part of the library. And then there's something with the diocese as well. But we've looked into that, and I have no idea where that went. The other thing that changed as well was when the quadrangle kind of redid everything years ago. They, you know, you used to be able to park in the quadrangle, which is kind of, it's a different thing now, but you know, they did all the parking, and the whole idea was that everybody that was going to the library, to the quadrangle, to all of that should be using Elliott, and everything. Not that idea of across the street was abandoned, but it was like, that's not where we want people to park. We want them to park over on the other way. However, when you stand, whenever I go to the library, I park on the other side of State Street because it's a shorter.
And then we both walk across in the middle.
Absolutely.
Well, and it is because there are the two driveways,
Yeah.
Everybody on the Zoom has done that.
Yeah.
Listen, I said it before.
Yeah.
We had Councilor Walsh. I mean, we have the candidate night, and I have watched every official in this city.
Absolutely.
Chris, what about taking
Well, it's
out?
because there are the two driveways.
So what about taking
Yeah.
out? What about taking out that unprotected one farther up, which I really don't think anybody uses, and
I
then
do.
put it in the mid? Well,
I do.
I do.
put it in the middle from the cathedral
You
as
can
far
leave
as
both.
from the cathedral to classical. Would that leave enough room either with a pedestrian island in the middle or without? Would that address some of the traffic queuing issues? Because I think queuing, and I don't think it queues all the way up most of it.
No, I got just want to look here real quick. I can't really see it too well. I think in general, just the answer is, I don't know, but it would be better. You move it farther up, it's better.
No,
Up the street, it's better. Because you do get out of the influence of the Chestnut Street intersection. You're far enough away from the School Street, Spring Street intersection as well. However, as I said, the reason why we've always looked at what we have is because it's always been the request that the location be at the front door.
No, that's not what we want.
It sounds to me from this discussion that the discussion is let's do something. And I don't think they're specific as to where, but Elizabeth, you have your hand up. And
I do.
Betsy and then Linda.
Bursting.
Well, Linda.
Elizabeth.
It's been pointed out to me that the stairs that were on the parking lot side were left over from the church.
Yes,
that was
they were.
where the
Yes.
parking lot is. So
Yes.
nobody put those steps in to provide a
That's
way
right.
for people to come go to the library. They were there. They were historic steps, but they're gone. So just keep that in mind. I also wanted to point out that farther up State Street, almost to Walnut and Federal, there is that crossing island that I'm assuming was put there because it would be really embarrassing if a bunch of high school students died as they were crossing the road. And we know high school students aren't going to pay attention to anything. They're worse than car drivers. And so if we can have that, which is pretty close to a traffic light, I think we can come up with a solution farther down State Street. It's all the same cars.
Right.
Just to let you know, Liz, when that was done, it was done specifically for the buses, obviously, but it was done for two reasons. For kids going to Commerce, secondarily, primarily, it was for students going to Stick.
Okay, so we're saving college students.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that either.
But what it had to be done was it had to be moved far enough down State Street to be away from the intersection so that it wouldn't influence the intersection. Stick was never happy because it was so far away from their entrance, because now the kids have to walk from there back up. And
actually, there is their gate that they opened up. They have to have, before COVID, they had a gate right there. They actually do have a gate right there that they open, that was open prior to COVID.
Right. So, but getting when they had their security issues and their parking, everybody had to walk back up State Street. So
but they addressed that. They opened up a gate.
Yeah. So they have that location there. That location was laid out specifically so that it was away from the intersection enough.
My point is that it was done to protect people and not cars. And all I hear is concern about cars, and we need to talk about protecting people. And I
don't
Linda,
disagree.
let Linda say
Linda's
something.
turn.
That's
No, Linda.
Linda. Okay, Linda.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. I am just thinking out of the box, and it could be a box that, is foolish because I don't know details of traffic control, but I think two things. And the first one is, what would be the consideration for a pedestrian bridge? Not to interfere with cars. I would just love, I know I'm coming late to this conversation since I haven't been living here, but I am curious about that. And then I'm also curious about some of the pedestrian safety crosswalk mechanisms.
Technology.
Technology. Thank you very much. That I see in South Hadley and in Northampton, where the crosswalk is actually emphasized with a cone with lights, for crossing very busy streets in front of Mount Holyoke and in the center of Northampton. So I'm just wondering about those considerations.
Those considerations, Linda, those are the type of technologies that we would be talking about for this. And the only difference, and I know what you're talking about, like Mount Holyoke as an example, while it's a, once a very heavily traveled road, they are placed in a particular location. And years ago, I did some private studies for Amherst College, same thing, because they have some stuff up there as well. The whole thing becomes placing them in a location far enough away from another intersection that you're not going to cause a problem. And that's really the whole thing, to make sure that
no, so everybody shook their heads very violently when I said pedestrian bridge. And
I like that idea.
Can you talk about that, Tony?
Yeah,
Sorry.
the city actually looked at a couple, parcel has been looked at a couple different times for a parking garage. For some various things, when there was development options for the old school department and things like that. If a parking garage were to be put there, installing a pedestrian bridge over that, absolutely 100% would be a great thing, a wonderful thing. Putting a pedestrian bridge there without a parking garage, nobody would use it.
Yeah.
Nobody would use it. People would just stand there, they cross the street.
So we usually keep our meetings to about an hour, and we've gone beyond that, but I know that you haven't spoken again on this, Betsy, so let me give you the last
Well, I just wanted to fill in that I have been working
with another meeting.
Yeah, but I just wanted to let you know that I have, had some UMass civil engineering students doing some beginning to look at some very cursory kinds of things, like doing these measurements and sort of looking at what might be some optimum distances away from the Maple Chestnut intersection and the Spring School intersection, and sort of playing around with some different configurations in terms of roadway narrowing and pedestrian island. And I do know there's some issues of needing to maintain it so people from Classical can make left and right turns out of that parking lot, which isn't a particularly safe thing with it being 4 lanes of traffic. So I think, there are issues related to that we'd also like to, that some treatment here could also help improve. And Mass DOT literally in the last year has already been, at least in terms of the presentations I've been subjected to at the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission meetings, the fact that they put this kind of crossing on Route 9 in Hadley, 4 lanes of traffic, that are huge, so there are exceptions that they're allowing almost everywhere and the fact that they're now offering these classes on what they call, pedestrian safety countermeasures. I mean, it's a whole new attitude from Mass DOT. So I think, and when I asked about whether they would, really be asking the city to reimburse, at least District 2 staff that I talked to said very unlikely. So, I think there's literally, the National NACTO guide has just come out with a new publication about city speed limits, a whole new rethinking as to what speed limits should be and how they should be set in cities, so that from the national level down through the state, almost daily there's new thinking on in this whole area. So I just want us to, keep the discussion going, not just say nothing can be done. We're not going to solve it today. I know the meeting has to end, but if, we can forget, maybe at least figure out how we can just have just play around with some different designs and sort of even outline what might need to be some additional studies. Jesse and I both have speed detection guns. We'll go out there and get you the detail of how fast the cars come down that road. So anyway, I just want a commitment that, this is not it's just not nothing. We've got to just keep it going.
We definitely are going to, the problem has existed for too long without there being some concrete improvements or something that shows that, the city is taking an interest in the pedestrian safety there. So, I'm going to end this meeting. I thank all of you for joining me today. I'm sorry about the glitch getting on, and we will schedule another meeting. Jesse.
Okay.
Madam Chair, could I say?
And thank you, Chris.
Oh, yes, thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Chris.
You're
Yes.
welcome.
Even though we don't agree with you, Chris, thank you for joining us.
Madam Chair, Madam Chair, one question.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Sorry, my computer.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Partially frozen. I think we've had a huge breakthrough, right, with the idea of the middle. And I'll take some responsibility for that, Chris, because I probably should have been more explicit about that before. Yeah. Could we maybe, but maybe our next meeting could be, Chris, if you could take a look at that, and then in a little while we could have another meeting to look at that.
And Chris, do we need somebody from the state to join us, or
no? That's premature. No. Well, and when you guys were talking about speed, what I'll also do is I'll talk to the police department about getting their speed board set up.
Yeah, that helped. They did that for a while, and that helped.
Yeah. And what I usually have them do, just so you know, when they set it up, usually the first time they set it up, it just sits there blank. I usually just have them set it up for a week blank. It does not blinking. It's not saying any numbers, but it's collecting all the data. It collects the speed data. Then I have them turn it on, and they do usually a little stupid note that says, have a nice day. Then they do it the third time where we flash the speed back, because when it flashes the speed back, people usually do slow down. So I like to collect all that different data. So I'll talk to Sergeant Kwiatkowski about getting that board up there for a while.
Oh, that's great.
Well, and then and the Armory Quadrangle, we don't have a lot of money, but we have a little money. We're not quite as rich as East Springfield Civic. But we too would be potentially willing to follow in their footsteps and get something permanent set up there, like they have done up in East Spring. They're our envy.
Yeah, well, I think they got a grant from Eastman.
It was donated by Eastman. Maybe
Eastman gave them the money.
Well, we would do some of the same things. I know Kay Simpson at the museum is very concerned because they use that as their overflow parking. And I'll tell you, this week is school vacation, and their parking lot below my window here was full this week. So they see the end of COVID coming, and their numbers coming back up. And she definitely want something done about this.
Well, that's great. And I want to thank you guys for being so
Okay.
concerned about having good things happen in the city. So we'll probably meet again. I'll
Yep.
find out from Chris when he can get more information, at least
No problem.
definitely within the next month. We'll keep
Thank you.
going until something gets done.
Yes,
know,
thank
Well, let
you.
us know,
Because
Tater.
Thank
Chris,
you all.
Chris, as you look at this, except for Jesse and Marcus, it's all the women that are after you. So we're
Yeah, all the
gonna-
women do is
yeah,
complain.
yeah,
All the
yeah.
women do is complain.
We're gonna make sure
Hey,
something
be
gets
careful
done.
there, Chris.
Maybe we think
My
you're
wife's
really
not on, so I
handsome.
can't get yelled at.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.